Well, Gary, where are we?
Not in the studio, that's for sure.
Not this time.
No.
We're at the Management Briefing Seminars, which is?
Held by CAR every year in Traverse City in August. It's August, and here we are again, as we were last year.
CAR, of course, being the Center for Automotive Research based out of Ann Arbor, because there's a number of cars all around the world. But we like coming to this conference because so many different people from the industry are here, and we get to take advantage of their access and bring them on the show.
And we got 3 good ones.
Okay, talk a little bit about it.
So we have Annette Hebert from CARB.
And explain what CARB is.
So CARB is the California Air Resources Board. So they're the very controversial organization that is promulgating its own environmental regulations in terms of emissions and greenhouse gases. We've got Larry Dominique, who is the brand new president of PSA North America. So the French company's coming back, and in an interesting way. And last but not least, we have Robert Davis, who is the Senior Vice President of Mazda North American Operations.
Yeah, and very interesting conversations. The one with Annette Hebert from CARB and the one with Robert Davis, kind of related from polar opposite views.
Yes.
And then Larry's thrown in the mix with literally almost starting a new company, a mobility company.
And it'll sell cars at some point, but we'll have to stay tuned to find out what kind of cars they're going to sell.
That's right. But rather than us tell you about them, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to start with Annette Hebert talking about what CARB is doing with emissions. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion. Lear, a global leader in automotive seating and electrical systems. Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world. And by Hyundai.
Annette Hebert is with the California Air Resources Board. It's great to have you joining us for this discussion.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Let's kick off with what's going on in Washington. We'll get to California, but the Trump administration wants to postpone or maybe even roll back fuel economy standards, and I'm sure you have a few things to say about that.
Well, in California, we did our own midterm review, and we did participate with the EPA and the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration.
Did you have car companies participating in that?
Well, car companies weren't, yes, we had a lot of one-on-one meetings with car companies throughout our midterm review process. So California, for sure, does not do regulations without talking to its stakeholders. We have a very rigorous process. Midterm review is 4 years worth of research and effort, meetings, researchers, contributing their products, evaluating it, and putting it into a big package that helped us determine if we're on the right track based on what we thought was going to happen in 2012. And what we discovered in the midterm review is that usual, and this has been the trend in the past, is that when we adopted the regs, we did underestimate the expansion or the availability of the technology comes out faster than we anticipate, and the costs tend to go down faster than we anticipate. So our review with the EPA and NHTSA all resulted in showing that the standards are indeed feasible and cost effective and are actually going to cost less. As a matter of fact, one of the things we discovered in 2016, over like 21% of the fleet out there, the models out there, already have greenhouse gas technology in them and meeting the standards of 2020 already.
What the automakers have complained about is the hockey stick nature of the increase. Not necessarily arguing with the end goal, but from 2021 to 2025, it's just like, wow, it really ramps up. Was that the kind of feedback you got from them?
We did get some of that feedback, but that was taken into consideration when we were negotiating the regulations. They're footprint-based standards. So first of all, the bigger the car, the lower the standard they have to meet. But in addition to that, we crafted in the ability to earn credits and what the manufacturers have been doing for the last 2, 3, 4 years is generating these abundant credits to help them with the harder years, the more complex years. So there is a huge bank of credits right now that are going to be used to help, flatten out or narrow or calm if there's a bad year coming up or there's a hockey stick effect. We do that on purpose for that reason. That's why manufacturers are allowed to.
So to John's point, so in California, you've basically determined that the regulations as you see them going forward to 2025 are doable by the automotive manufacturers without a extreme burden on them in terms of economics.
So far what we've seen is no. We believe that it is doable, it is less impacting than we had thought, but also California is proceeding with post-2025 rulemaking efforts, and obviously, just like we did in the previous regulations, we're going to meet with manufacturers. As a matter of fact, one of the things I'm going to say today is we're going to kick off our meetings with automakers this month, invite them in to talk about post-2025. And in developing those rules, we're going to do what we always do, and that's look at what the current state of the market is, the current state of technology is, what the potential costs are. So the midterm review is really just a rolling effort over and over again. So it's not like the midterm review is done, we're not going to look at what's happening anymore. We're going to continue to look in our post-2025 process.
And what are your thoughts? What might those regulations look like, in the sense that would they go out yet another decade to say 2035 or even beyond that? Will the emphasis be more on carbon dioxide reduction than it is right now, or the emphasis on fuel efficiency? And I know the two are related, but it seems to me that CO2 is what California has been more focused on.
No, that's not correct. Actually, air quality is a very high priority for California, but climate stabilization is an equal priority. So and what we did for the Advanced Clean Cars rulemaking in 2012 is start bringing those two sides of the house together. And what we plan to do for post-2026 is sit down and really talk to manufacturers and other stakeholders about how they see post-2025 market and activities and how it can help both reduce air quality emissions and greenhouse gas emissions and work together and increase the volumes of ZEVs, zero emission vehicles, because that's very important in California too. And we are actually inviting automakers to come in and talk to us and opening up opportunities for them to give us their thoughts and ideas and concepts, in addition to the environmental groups and the communities and et cetera. And we're also going to invite some of our international partners to come in too. And we're open to thinking if there's a different way.
I hate to keep interrupting, but I don't
China,
know.
Well, China, the Netherlands, Norway, we have International ZEV Alliance, but there's a lot of global activity going on around electrification and low carbon fuels efforts and low carbon vehicle efforts. And I have a slide today, I'll mention several of those going on throughout the world. I think the United Kingdom and France said they're going to ban all diesels and gasolines by 2040. Thank you. I didn't want to get the fact wrong, but so there's a lot of global efforts going on, and so we want to sit down and think about, well, do we need to just continue our program as is and just continue to ratchet down on it, or do we need to look at it a little bit differently and think about it more broadly, and if there's some changes we need to make? So that's what we're doing, is we're going to kick off that process with automakers. We've been doing some thinking internally ourselves, but we're going to kick off that process with automakers first and see, do they have some ideas and concepts as to what can help us get to our air quality and climate stabilization goals, but at the same time, is in line with the costs and the impacts on the economy. And don't forget, the economy is not just about what happens to automakers, it's also about, healthcare costs, because the children with asthma and, cardiopulmonary issues from the result of air pollution. So
you're talking post-2025.
Yes.
Nationally, we don't even know if we're going to get to 2025. So what is the reaction of the automakers when you're suggesting to them that, okay, we're sticking to our guns and we're going to go even further?
Well, the meetings haven't started yet.
Right. You obviously are talking to people on a regular basis. This isn't, and so there's uncertainty that exists nationally. in terms of what the regulation will be?
California has yet to be getting the call and been invited to any discussions that are going on nationally. Yet, we're open to going. We obviously think that the midterm review was completed and the science showed that there was no reason to change them, but we're open to participating in the discussions, and provided also those discussions don't try and attack our authority and our ability to protect, the health of our citizens.
And one of the things that California has talked about getting is decarbonized gasoline. Because you could clean up every vehicle that runs on gasoline right now and not have to wait for future models to be able to come out. Where's that stand?
Well, it's decarbonizing gasoline.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're more focused on electrification and using renewable fuels.
Right, but that's going to take decades to convert the fleet to an electrified fleet, whereas cleaner gasoline would clean up everything instantly.
Well, I would say we would be open to looking at that, but what I can tell you in my job, doing what I do, running a lab and doing enforcement and compliance from combustion engine sources, not just light duty vehicles, but all categories, as long as there is a combustion or internal combustion engine, there's going to be emissions. You can clamp down on them, you can make them less, you can make them lower, but I really think we need to transform the powertrain of especially starting with vehicles to electrification, or electric motive, powertrains, and run off of renewable energy. I think that's really the only way we're going to get there.
Annette, you mentioned that there's new technology that has been developed since you originally made the regulations. What are some of the technologies that you see are making great strides towards cleaning up the air in California?
Well, for instance, Atkinson cycles. We've had, there's 6, 7, 8 speed transmissions that are being developed. There's gasoline direct injection, and that's one of the things we actually saw improve. The early gasoline direct injection engines, while they did pretty good for GHG, they didn't do so well for criteria. But the newer... GHG? I'm sorry, greenhouse gas emissions. Okay. I'm sorry. Greenhouse gas emissions where CO2 falls in. Now remember, greenhouse gas emissions includes CO2, carbon dioxide, but it also includes methane, it also includes nitrous oxide, it also includes refrigerants from air conditioning systems off of cars. So all of that contributes to greenhouse gas emissions. Okay. It's not just about carbon dioxide. So gasoline direct injection engines, that's one of the things we saw improve from when we initially reviewed in 2012 to when we most recently reviewed, that the newer gasoline direct injection engines are actually do a good job on the greenhouse gas part of it, but also don't negatively impact the criteria emissions part. So that's part of what we need to do. That's why we're merging the programs together, because we don't want improvements in the greenhouse gas side of the house to impact the criteria side of the house. We need both. And whenever you talk about that, I think that's why California is a strong believer that we have to convert the powertrains to electric.
Have you, as you convert to electric, what kind of research are you doing into recycling of lithium-ion batteries? Because right now, there's nobody who knows how to do this in scale and for a profit. And if all we're going to end up doing is throwing these batteries in the landfill, that's not very sustainable.
No, I agree. I think we have, there's outside experts out of ARB that that we're relying on to provide us that information. And we do have staff that attend the battery conferences and discuss about, one, how the cost of the batteries are coming down and what could be done to recycle batteries or remanufacture batteries even. So we're definitely staying on top of that. We do have to consider that. We're not going to, look the other way.
But no one has a solution as of right now.
No, but not yet. But that I'm aware of anyway. But I'm not the battery expert. But I'll definitely follow up on that when I get back in the house.
Okay. Annette, what about people who make the argument that if you have electric vehicles, that yes, you don't have tailpipes, and things are coming out of tailpipes, but somewhere there is a big plant that is generating electricity that's burning coal and causing pollution there. I mean, how do you responding?
This is why that we have a big push to running on renewables. You really have to transfer electricity to running on renewables. Renewable generation, that's the only way to really attack the what we call the life cycle emissions.
So this would be renewable, like, so we're using wind
gas,
farms or?
Well, landfill gas, wind farms,
Yes,
that type
to
of
generate electricity
electrolysis,
that's then used to...
Right, on smaller scales. For instance, fuel cell electric vehicles, it runs on hydrogen. And right now the main source of hydrogen for fuel cell vehicles is the reformation of natural gas. Longer term, and we're already doing this, some people are already doing this, is instead getting the hydrogen from landfill gas or from electrolysis instead.
So do you care if it's hydrogen as the source of electricity or electricity as the source of electricity? Meaning if it comes from a plug in the wall that I'm plugging my vehicle in, right? So the energy is being generated by the utility versus I have a Mirai that I'm generating the electricity that way. I mean, do you have a
Preference?
yes?
No, I think both the battery electric vehicle and the fuel cell electric vehicle both have their advantages. And I think it's going to take both to make and plug-in hybrids. Don't forget plug-in hybrids, which are a battery electric vehicle, or it could be part fuel cell electric vehicle as well. We haven't seen a lot of those, but we see a lot of plug-in hybrid vehicles that have both the electric powertrain on it, like the Volt, for instance, but also still have the gasoline engine.
We're down to less than a minute here. Quick answer. California's made tremendous progress in cleaning up its air. Do you see the day? Is there a light at the end of the tunnel here where you go, yeah, we're going to hit the day where we've really made the air clean enough for all segments of society?
Don't see it yet, and I'll share today where we still have a ways to go to meet our air quality standards and make our air healthful enough, especially for the sensitive populations, and the climate stabilization is still a long ways off too, so I don't see an end yet.
Look, we're going to have to wrap this up. Thanks so much for sitting down with us. We've been peppering you with questions, and I know we could go on even longer with it, but thanks so much for your time.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
And we'll be back right after this. Larry Dominique is the president and CEO of PSA North America. For those who are not up to speed on that, PSA is the parent company of Peugeot and Citroën.
Correct.
I want to say that Peugeot dropped out of the American market 1981-ish.
1991.
91, it went that
91.
long.
Yeah.
Citroën, I want to say, dropped out of the American market in 1973 or something like that.
Well, they actually, I think Citroën kept in until late 70s, but was actually,
right?
it wasn't even acquired by PSA Group until 1975.
I did not know that. Okay, anyway, you're bringing the Peugeot brand back to the United States, and you're starting out as a mobility service provider with the brand first. Is that right, or you take it from there, Larry?
Well, basically from a branding point of view, John, we haven't announced yet which brand is coming back.
Oh.
So on a global basis, as of this morning, we now have 5 vehicle brands.
Name them.
So we have Peugeot, Citroën, DS, which a lot of people in the United States aren't necessarily that familiar with. We now have Opel and Vauxhall as well, as of this morning. So, and we have a 6th brand called Free to Move, which is actually our global mobility brand, which is actually billed, which is really interesting, is actually billed at the same level as our car brands on a global basis.
But your plans are first to provide mobility services under the PSA umbrella.
Correct. So under the Free to Move brand, our goal is, as part of the PSA Push to Pass plan, which was the plan that Carlos Tavares unveiled last year.
And of course, he's the CEO of...
Yep, CEO of PSA Group.
And has done a pretty terrific job at turning the company around.
He absolutely has, and now with Opel Vauxhall, he's got a lot of other ambitions as well for the company. But from a standpoint of the North American operation in particular, what he announced as part of Push to Pass plan is this is part of a 10-year plan to come back to North America. So his plans and his request to me is let's do this methodically. Let's be careful. It's a very bloody ocean market. You know, it's 17 million, yes, but there's 370 models for sale, high cost of distribution. How can we come back to the market where we can learn the market, understand it, see how consumers are evolving and changing, and develop the right strategies on how to attract those customers? So yes, we are going to start with mobility. And mobility, depends on who you talk to, has a broad definition, right? And from our standpoint, mobility means providing a level of service to consumers no matter how they want to ingest transportation, whether that's partial vehicle ownership, whether that's ride hailing, car sharing, microtransit, whichever forms of mobility you need, we want to be that provider. And I think what's important to that is, as you mentioned, we've been out since 1991. So it's been 26 years, and it's going to be a few more years before we actually have cars available for the North American market. So we need to understand how American consumers think about different brands. We need to understand how their expectations for the services that OEMs provide them is kind of evolving. So we're going to start with offering mobility. And one of the key things we're probably going to start with is our Free2Move brand under an aggregation platform. So people are like, okay, what does that mean, Larry? What we mean by that is an aggregation platform is under our Free2Move banner today in Europe, you can log on to our application, and in one app, you can access Zipcar, ReachNow, Car2Go, Turo. So if you're in Berlin, if you're in Paris, you can see and book any one of those mobility providers' vehicles from our application.
Are they all PSA vehicles that you can get?
Absolutely not.
Very interesting. That's pretty bold for a car company to do.
So what's the advantage? I mean, it would seem to me, I imagine that basically what you're talking about is that you would have a whole bunch of whatever brand you're going to be bringing, that John or I would be able to go to our app and get one of those cars. But you're suggesting that this is going to be open?
Multi-branded. And there's really two pieces to this, and I'll circle back on how we're approaching multi-brand in Europe right now. But on the aggregation platform, Gary, think of it this way. How many cars would we need to have in operation in a city to make sure you have a vehicle available to you as close as you are? If we can access the vehicles that Car2Go puts in the fleet, and ReachNow puts in the fleet, and Maven puts in the fleet, or whoever the provider might be, allows us to make sure we're introducing you to a car as a service. Because the reality is, a lot of times when you talk to consumers that are advocates of car sharing, for the most part, they don't really care what the brand is. What they care about is, will the vehicle get me from point A to point B? I mean, I go to Paris a lot, and I sit there and I look at some of these vehicles that are offered in mobility car sharing. And there's one restaurant I like, sits right in front of one of these stations with 5 of these cars in front of it. And I've literally walked over and talked to the people and said, okay, you're going to use this car. Who makes this car? And they're like, I have no idea. Does it have 4 doors? Does it hold 4 people? I mean, they want to know it's the right hardware to get them to point A to point B. But these customers are not the ones that are passionate about the product. They're not the ones who are passionate about the brand that they're buying. They're not buying a car, they're buying a service or renting a service. So being multi-branded in that case to us is agnostic. In Europe, as part of the Push to Pass plan that Carlos Tavares unveiled last year, we bought a company in Europe called Euro Repair. So we've actually incorporated this third-party repair in our Peugeot, Citroën, and DS dealers, where if you have a Volkswagen, you can get your Volkswagen serviced at a Peugeot dealer. So we're doing multi-branded service, we're doing multi-branded leasing, because we're providing a service. So yes, you might say, and this is where it gets sticky to people, wait a minute, you'd help somebody actually lease a Volkswagen? Well, yeah, we're making money on the financing, right? So we're broadening our business opportunities and looking at business opportunities that have better margin.
So the definition of PSA North America is not simply a company that sells cars.
Correct, absolutely. And I think that's a great point, Gary, because launching mobility services now, and I think it's important to understand, mobility services means I still need to service vehicles, I need to have fleet management, I need to have financing. So I can build all those businesses with global PSA brands to help me establish those businesses in North America. So I'm going to engage customers for several years before I actually start retailing cars. So the way I like to think of it is when we sell cars, eventually That's the exclamation point at the end of the sentence. But prior to that, people know us, and people have already engaged with us. Millions of customers, hopefully, will have engaged with us on a multitude of levels.
Wow. What will the brand be, though? It will be this mobility brand?
So the mobility brand will be Free to Move. So eventually, we'll have Free to Move tied in with the automotive brand. So when we announce the brand, which will be sometime in the relatively near future, it'll be Free to Move by X. So we'll tie those brands together. And then eventually, as I homologate vehicles and get homologated vehicles for North America, I can put those into my mobility fleets. But it doesn't mean I'm going to throw away all the other cars I'm using. It just means I'm going to be supplementing, because maybe somebody else has a great B segment sedan or hatchback that I want to put in the fleet, and I don't have that. So I'm going to make sure that I have the full array that the customer expects in the services.
This is fascinating. You mentioned that the margins are better. What kind of margins are you talking about?
So, one of the advantages I've had, John, is when I stepped out of the OEM halls for a while, I got to work on the technology side for several years. And I started to deal also on the consulting side with a lot of these technology companies. And when I sold data and when I sold technology at ALG, we're talking about 70, 80, 90% margins. And they're scalable, because once you provide a service and develop the software and the interface, to scale it doesn't really cost you more. You just sign more people up and you get more revenue per user. And from that standpoint, so you're talking about a business we're in, which is high investment, 2 to 4% return on sales.
For traditional car.
For traditional car manufacturing, versus technology companies, which you would expect to see 50, 60, 80, 90% kind of margins for some of these other businesses. So if we can complement that together, it just builds a more robust business model in general.
So 20%, 25%, what are we looking at here for margins for providing mobility services?
I think depending on the mobility services, you could easily see 25 to 50% margins, depending on what
25 to 50%.
So the aggregation platform side, I'd expect very high margins, like 50% plus. Mm-hmm. In the car sharing, microtransit, you still have vehicles. You still have cost of doing your business. So those margins would be less, but significantly higher than we have
But
today.
that would be your fleet in that case, the microtransit, or?
It would be a fleet of vehicles that I operate. They may not be PSA vehicles.
Would you own them?
That depends on the business model. That would be up to my finance guy, but most operating businesses lease, they don't own. Mm-hmm. Just from a standpoint of you can turn the vehicles and you manage to move financially things off of your books onto other people's books, mm-hmm. and you manage the operation that way. But the important part is, if you look globally at things like car sharing, you need a fairly high utilization rate of the vehicles to be a profitable business. And that's where a lot of companies have struggled. And if you have 500 vehicles in operation in a city, you probably want between 10 and 12% of those vehicles in motion at every moment, 24 hours a day, to make a solid business. So when we talk about margins, John, it really depends on how well you do establishing your presence in that market, how well your application and your parking and everything else is to let customers utilize those vehicles. And that's a really important part of it.
Part of your charter is going to be introducing Peugeot or Citroën or DS or whatever in the US market. Now, I would make the argument that basically most Americans have no idea what these brands are. No offense, but that's just how it is.
I have data that would suggest otherwise, but
really? I
yes.
mean, how many people here know what a Citroën is, for example?
So what I can tell you is of our three brands, Peugeot has the highest awareness, but Peugeot is also here in the North American market the most. And I would tell you that of our brands, about half of the people we put through thousands of surveys and things knew of the brand.
Really?
Now, what they know of the brands is limited, but what's important to understand about any new brand that comes to the United States, if somebody sees a French automobile, they can say it's a beautiful car, it's luxurious, it's exciting, it's emotional, but they still ask questions. Is it safe? Is it reliable? Is it durable? Is it going to be with good quality? So there's elements associated with whatever brand we're bringing here to North America that we have to prove, that these are great vehicles. They're not only emotional and fun to drive, but they're also safe and reliable and durable. So we have to make sure that those practical elements are in place and understood before we actually launch the cars.
As you look at this move to mobility services, what do you think is going to happen? How many people will give up ownership of a car to just rely on mobility services to buy their mobility as they need it?
That's a great question, John. I think that's one of the questions that a lot of OEMs are asking themselves. That's why so many people are taking this shotgun approach and investing everywhere, hoping that something sticks out of that. I think of the market this way, okay, we have 100% of the market. Last year, about 17% of the market was some sort of fleet. It was rental, it was, car fleets, those kind of things. So about 87% were retailed in one way or another. I think 15, 20 years from now, we might still see 60% of the vehicles retailed in the very traditional ways that we retail today. I mean, more modern, more digital, but when I say it's a sale between a consumer and an OEM. You live in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, some rural, city in Nebraska. The idea of car sharing is probably not relevant to you when your closest neighbor's 3 miles away. But in the urban centers, we're seeing a growth in urban population. We're seeing cities focusing on reducing carbon footprint and reducing traffic in cities. Definitely a growth opportunity. So if we're at 17 million a year, there's probably a couple million vehicles in there every year that are going to be more mobility based, right? So it's not the majority, but it's not about that's your core business. That's complementary, and that's an important part. And I think a lot of OEMs looking at it going like, oh my gosh, if I don't focus on that, it's lost market share. It's lost production. The good news for me, I don't have a plant sitting here, in Georgia or Mexico or any place else. I get to tap into a production network that's global already. I get to bring vehicles in on a marginal profit basis. And I can focus on the brand, I can focus on transaction prices, I can focus on customer satisfaction without worrying about, making sure those 200,000 cars I just produced have an outlet and a way to sell them. So it's a little bit more measured approach to the market, and we can take the time to do that because there's not a lot of instant pressure.
If the margins are so much better on the providing of a service versus selling a vehicle, is it conceivable that you may not sell vehicles in the United States?
I don't think so. The core part of our business, we saw, I think the estimate for this month was the average transaction price was over $34,000. Mm-hmm. The revenue piece, you don't have to sell a lot of vehicles to have a lot of revenue, right? And throughput is still important to running your business. So you have to have turnover in your business to have a successful business. And the revenue associated with high transaction price automobiles fuels the regulatory compliance development and technology and the future other technologies you can employ. So it's a matter of thinking of the transportation world in a broader sense. It's not just about manufacturing and selling cars anymore. Our traditional model, we sell cars, we service cars, right? And we sell used cars. That's what a lot of people think of today. In the future, we have to engage customers on a much broader scale and a much more interactive basis. If it's only once every 4 to 5 years I interact with you, I lose you for 4 or 5 years in between. Our goal at PSA is we want to engage you through all your needs through mobility and transportation through your entire life cycle.
Larry, I'm afraid we're out of time for this segment, but we're going to have you back on the show because
Wonderful.
What you're doing is absolutely fascinating. It's going to be great to watch how you grow this business. Congratulations to you, by the way, for getting the CEO and president title and starting something brand new like this.
Thank you. A lot to do over the next couple of years, so a lot to talk about.
Very good. And we'll be back with more right after this.
Lear Connexus offers a parental controls application with geofencing that sends notifications regarding driving behavior and location, including curfew alerts, acceleration alerts, and speed alerts, all delivered to a smartphone application that includes vehicle location, driver notifications, and a report card of driving history, including notifications when predefined geographic boundaries are crossed. For more information, visit Lear.com.
Robert Davis is a Senior Vice President with Mazda North America, and thanks for joining us here.
Oh, thank you, John.
You're going to be speaking at this conference. What are you going to be talking about?
I'll be bumbling and stumbling through a bunch of stuff, but basically talking about we feel strongly that the life of the internal combustion engine, there's still a long life ahead, and Mazda's focus its core technologies on improving the internal combustion engine as a priority before you start putting electronic devices on it. So we feel strongly that to keep Mazdas as Mazdas, continuing to advance internal combustion engine technology is key. And we've set ourselves some goals and really see a bright future.
So what are the things that you need to do in order to make this happen?
We need to continue to develop technologies around the elements of not only the engine and transmission, but the rest of the body structure and the rest of the vehicle. So it's a bunch of little things versus one big thing.
So I mean, this is SkyActiv. You guys have been chasing that for 3 or 4 years now, I think.
Yeah, SkyActiv Technologies delivered a lot of great things for us. You know, we've been #1 in fuel economy for the last 4 years with the forecast to have a 5-peat coming on. That gives Mazda a great position in the marketplace. But not only the fuel economy, but the CO2 use is the best in the industry. Put in place with that IIHS top safety picks in every car that they've tested for us. So it shows that you can have a great fuel efficient vehicle with really low CO2 emissions, really good safety, and guess what? There's not a single hybrid, a single electric, a single plug-in in our fleet. So it just shows you that an internal combustion's still got a long way to go.
There's been some people that I was talking to earlier at this conference who said maybe another 30% improvement yet to be had in the internal combustion engine. You guys see it that way?
Yeah, maybe I don't know if I'd say 30% improvement in the internal combustion engine, but I think 30% improvement in the whole system as it goes forward. And also the thing we need to be looking at is well-to-wheel activity. So understanding where the power comes from and how you get it to the wheel. We're good enough as an industry to understand where electricity comes from, where oil comes from. So to have a bigger view of that to make it even more efficient than 30%.
We recently interviewed somebody from the California Air Resources Board who they're looking beyond 2025, 2026, and who knows how far forward. They think the standards have got to get a whole lot tougher than they are.
Well, I appreciate their point of view, and I think my grandfather once told me that somebody's not always right and somebody's not always wrong. You know, there's a balance in there. I think the customer acceptance of the California policy right now is our biggest concern, because the business is not robust around the supported vehicles in BEV. And also a battery electric vehicle, let's face it, it's not a zero emissions vehicle, it's a remote emissions or a displaced emissions vehicle. So is truly the force the consumer to go toward the battery electric vehicle, is that the best thing for the environment? Mm-hmm. There's a couple of cases that were shown by us and shown by ExxonMobil today that maybe that's not the way to go.
In what way?
Well, and understanding that if transportation is going to have a larger share of energy consumption, that maybe decommissioning some of the existing energy plants is a better option than using that extra energy for cars. So I think we're calling to look at it on a bigger basis, have a wider view, and have the environment as the end game. So whether it's transportation or electricity generation, we need to understand the whole picture. California is lucky, they got a great supply of energy, but we're here in the Midwest. Midwest is much more focused on coal, oil, natural gas than California. So that balance is a little bit different by region.
Mm-hmm. Robert, Mazda is a small car company by any measure. You have these lofty goals. You guys are developing this technology to achieve these great gains. How come the bigger car companies aren't doing things like this? I mean,
well, thank you. I think, Gary, the bigger car companies are doing it. I think if you looked at Toyota's presentation today on their new latest architecture, it's very, very strong. And so they are doing it. The understanding for us is that we're laser focused on the internal combustion solution, because we feel if you improve that base structure by 30%, when you start adding the electrical devices on top of it to improve it even more, it can grow by even more than 30%. So that's really where our focus is and why we think it's so important. I think being a small company actually helps us in this scenario because it allows us to think on a broader basis. Where the negative comes from is when you've got big giant companies that can focus on much more and much wider solutions to this problem. I think we heard everybody in the presentation today talk about This is not just one thing. This is going to be everything to make this work.
They're spreading their bets, and you guys are focusing.
Right.
But you're not counting out electrification in the future.
No, I mean, we've got a great technology alliance with them. So if you're gonna have a technical alliance, they're a good one to have.
Toyota is.
Toyota is.
Yeah. Robert, the problem with carbon is in the fuel, not necessarily the engine. I know General Motors and Ford have called for high octane gasoline, much higher than what we've got. In fact, selling only premium blend. Both the EPA and the California Air Resources Board have talked about decarbonized gasoline. What do you know about that? I mean, wouldn't that be the solution? What if you could take 20-30% of the carbon out of gasoline?
I think that would be one of the solutions moving forward. I mean, I think if you have a good understanding of what kind of fuel you're going to use and what the blends of fuels we have available in the U.S., then we can tune the engine specifically for that. For example, in our powertrains in Japan, our compression ratio is 14-1 for gasoline, and it's 13-1 here. And that's that balance that you're talking about of understanding what you want to do a premium fuel. I think it's just a balance, a scenario that says, is the CO2 savings and the cost savings, where does that balance come in? And we've just got to understand that. And again, we feel strongly it needs to be looked at on a wider view. That might be one of the solutions to the whole scenario.
Mm-hmm. In other words, what you're saying is don't just look at the tailpipe, look at the total, life cycle of the whole thing.
Right, and understand everything about it. Understand where the energy comes from, whether that's electric or gas. Understand what the recyclability and the environmental impact is on things like batteries and the rest of the car. We've got this number. It's just that all these numbers, it's just the political ramifications to talk about it really stop it from happening. The scenario I used today in my presentation was John Kennedy said, we're going to send a man to the moon and back by the end of the decade, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. At the same time, he didn't give the scientists NASA to say, okay, you're going to use a single stage rocket and you're going to have a mobile launcher, and by the way, your zenith vectoring has to be such and such. He let the scientists find the solution, and that's our position. Give us the number, let us find a way to get there.
I think you just hit on a key too that the EV enthusiasts never bring up. No one's able to recycle lithium-ion batteries in scale for a profit.
Yeah, I learned today there's a company in Belgium that doesn't do much good for us in America or any other places in the world, but that's becoming available. I think what I heard today is that technology is moving, and it's moving fast, but I heard that 5 years ago. I heard that 10 years ago. So I hope it moves, and I hope it moves fast for the sake of the environment, but we've got today, and today's customers aren't buying the cars around that kind of technology. So let's continue to move it. At the same time, let's understand the impact of the lithium and the other chemicals in the batteries. I don't know right now whether it's good or bad. I just know I don't know.
Robert, Mazda has developed diesel technology. Do you see that as being viable for the U.S. market?
Yeah, we're still committed to diesel, Gary. We're working on the final stages of our calibration with EPA and ARB. I'm not going to commit to you the timing of it because I did that 3 other times and I was wrong all 3 times. So I have learned my lesson.
But do you think the American consumer is going to be accepting of a diesel-powered pass car?
I think they are, as long as it develops the right level of performance and the right level of fuel economy for them. There's a lot of acceptance of Volkswagen TDI customers to our products. We've done some research with that. So there's a group of customers. Is it 10% of the industry? No. Is it 1% of the industry? Maybe yes. There's also a bunch of people that use diesel and other forms of transportation they have that are pretty comfortable with it. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, trucks and SUVs, full-size trucks and SUVs, diesels don't do half bad there.
Exactly, I own 2 of them myself, so I'm right there with them.
Mm-hmm. So sales came out for you guys today, and the MX-5 Miata is continuing to do well. So you're an enthusiast.
Yep.
Is that the core of that sale?
Yeah, I think what we see that the RF version and the soft top don't cannibalize each other like the prior hardtop and softtop did. So it seems to be diverging of two different kind of clients with that. You know, that market's not that big anywhere in the world, but we're number one in the world with over 1 million Miatas sold. So best-selling roadster of all time.
Speaking of that, and enthusiasts, the tagline for Mazda, of course, is driving matters. And you guys are still very heavily committed to motor racing. Is that something that continues in the future?
Yeah, absolutely, John. I mean, motor racing is at the core of the Mazda culture. And our IMSA program is very important to us. And
it's showing some recent signs of big progress, too.
Yep, and we got a new partner for next year with Jost Racing. And so we've got good things coming along there.
Jost is based out of Germany, of course, and how's that relationship going to work? Because you're going to be doing all that racing here in the U.S., right?
Yeah, they're going to have a local operation in the U.S. I've not been that involved in the development of their team structure, but obviously they're going to be here in the U.S. and their reputation speaks for itself with umpteen million Le Mans wins, and I don't know how many wins from Audi here in America with ALMS, but they're a powerhouse. We're proud to have them as a partner.
Mm-hmm.
Now you guys have a full suite of crossover vehicles also, so it sort of seems odd that you have these little two-seat Miatas and then you have a CX-9 that is capacious for an entire family. How does that work? I mean, when you're developing these vehicles, how do you get the large and the small and make them both Mazdas?
Well, I was really impressed that you weave capacious into a sentence. Really, it starts with the powertrains. Our powertrain is developed around the combustion process itself, and then we scale it. And our powertrain, whether it's 1.5 liters or 2 liters for Miata, is the same basically scaled powertrain as that CX-9 with a 2.5 liter. So understanding that, and then getting away from the preconceived notions of a platform strategy. The Mazda strategy is much more complex than that. That's probably why the reason we don't talk about it that much, because it's too hard to put in a 30-second soundbite. But the ability of having the engineers to mix and match parts to develop cars that can be as small as the Mazda 2, which we don't even sell in the U.S., but as capacious as the CX-9.
Robert, passenger car sales going down in the
they're
U.S.
awful.
market. Does that change your product planning going forward?
I think it does. I think it changes the way that we have to look at the way the market is developed. I think we've got, as we go forward with EPA and all the calculations we have to make, we've got to assume that trend is going to continue. We're always forced with a decision. We've got some of our big competitors that have whole plants dedicated to sedans, right? So at the end of the day, John, they're going to keep that plant running. The cost of not building the car is bigger than the crazy incentive they got on the car today. Our manufacturing operations are much more flexible. So while we've got to take into consideration the dealer aspect and the volume aspect, but we've got different decisions to make. So we feel strongly that let's go where the customers want to go. As a industry, history-wise, we've not been very good at pulling or pushing the customers into a segment. They're better at pulling us into the right segments. And that actually even is supported with the electric vehicle comments that I made today. The trends in the marketplace are the trends in the marketplace. As an industry, we need to do better trying to get to them versus trying to push the customer into a sedan.
Real good. Robert, I'm afraid with that we're going to have to wrap this up. Thanks for stopping by, though. Always a pleasure to talk with you. Yeah,
Thank you.
Great having you on the show.
Hey, Gary, thanks.
BorgWarner, developing advanced technology specifically aimed at reducing emissions, increasing fuel economy, and improving performance. Our award-winning innovations extend from turbocharging and cooling systems to friction materials and diesel cold start technology. Built on a century-long reputation of innovation and reliability, we have the track record that proves our technology can help meet the challenges of the commercial truck and off-highway industry.
Okay, we're back. We're going to wrap up the show soon, but it would not be an Autoline After Hours if Dr. Data did not make an appearance.
Okay.
And so you got a number there, Gary?
We do have a number. It is 120,256. Now, we're in Michigan. Okay, this is northern Michigan, but we're in Michigan, so I tried to make this one topical this time. So what might this be?
We're in Traverse City.
And we're at the car conference.
Yeah.
And it's all about automobiles and mobility and trucks and cars and...
That's the accumulation of golf scores of everybody who's been playing golf at the conference.
Wow, that's a good guess.
But that's not the answer.
It is the number in miles of paved roads in the state of Michigan.
Oh, I did not know that. 120,000 plus.
So according to the state of Michigan, you could actually pave a single lane road to the moon with that distance. So there you go.
That's an important statistic that all of our viewers should be aware of.
That's right.
That's great. So what did you think of the show, the conference, everything so far?
Well, it was interesting that, as you mentioned earlier on, that Robert Davis saying we're going to get the internal combustion engine far more improved than it is now, and we're going to be able to hit emissions goals. And yet you have Annette Hebert is saying, no, we don't think the internal combustion engine has got that much life. We need to electrify things much, much more. So I thought that was...
So how do you think it's going to shake out?
I think Mazda is a very small company, and I think the state of California is a very big market, and I have a feeling the state of California is going to probably win on this one. Mm-hmm. But what did you think about Larry talking about PSA starting a mobility service and having cars available from other companies, not PSA?
That flipped me out, and boy, that shows that things are changing in this industry, and I commend PSA for even considering doing that. Mm-hmm. And they're already doing it in Europe.
Right.
So very interesting, and I loved what he was talking about in terms of profit margins too. That there might be profit margins of 20 to 50%, 25 to 50% in this mobility business. That's way more than what any car company is making.
It's an order of magnitude.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. So. Wow, when you start thinking outside the box and say, hey, let's make money off everybody else's cars too. Very radical thinking.
Okay, one final question.
Yeah.
Is PSA going to become a successful brand in the U.S. market?
No, I don't think so. As we've talked, Gary, there's too many brands. Mm-hmm. There's too many car companies. There's too many car models. So I think that PSA or Peugeot, or I'm guessing DS is going to be the brand that they come with, because that's the one they're really pushing around the world. But I think they're, what did he call it, free to move. I think that brand could become successful, but I don't see any of Peugeot's brands becoming successful in the U.S. market.
Well,
what do you think?
If anybody can do it, Larry can. I mean, his experience at Nissan, his experience at TrueCar, ALG, I mean, he has an understanding of this, in terms of product development as well as the market. So, I wouldn't bet against him, but I agree with you that, I think that there are a whole lot of Americans who just have no idea what PSA is, or what DS is, or Citroën is, or Peugeot is. And so, how do you introduce a new brand? I mean, we're seeing Alfa struggle, Fiat struggle, so now we're going to have the French.
Yeah, but like I said, I think their mobility brand could catch on. But that's why we come to a conference like this, to get all different kinds of viewpoints of what's going on in the industry right now and looking towards the future.
Sure.
Okay, well, we'll wrap it up, and we'll do it again next week.
Okay.
I want to thank all of you for having tuned in.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion. Lear, a global leader in automotive seating and electrical systems. Borg Warner, propulsion solutions that support a clean, energy-efficient world. And by Hyundai.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday afternoons. Get your daily fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv.